oftentimes the accusation or maybe the caricature that comes in at this point is that, well, if you hold to a classical understanding of God, that's just the God of Aquinas or Anselm or maybe Augustine, but that's not, that type of God is completely foreign to Christianity in its original forms or what we see in the Bible. But
so you confine yourself to Western references there.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. I have.
Cappadocian Fathers, Maximus the Confessor,
Yes.
Theophylact,
Athanasius.
and Plato and Aristotle and the whole, Plato actually, or at least the Neoplatonists too. I mean, it's this sort of classical picture you'll be told is, since it has adherents outside of Christianity, is therefore somehow not biblical either. Well, I mean, the thing is, of course, if that were so, that would mean that the first generations of Christian thinkers were all deeply deceived about what they believed in, wouldn't it? Because we find that as early as the first generation, not just the first generation people like apologists, Justin Martyr, for instance, and others, but even in the scripture itself, take the Gospel of John. Here it helps if you read Greek, which I understand not everyone does, but even there, at the very beginning, a distinction is made between God in the fullest sense, Theos, and Theos. Now, the question that it raises in chapter 1, in a sense, only answers progressively throughout the Gospel, and then definitely answers clearly in chapter 20, is the Logos Theos or Theos? Is he God in himself? Is he co-equal with the Father, to use the language of Nicaea? Or is he just a sort of divine messenger, a reduced a creature or an emanation or a reduced manifestation of God? Because in the prologue to the Gospel, using language that everyone would have understood intellectually in the first century, the Father is referred to as Theos, but it's not clear that the Logos is. But then, in the course of the Gospel, Christ will say things like, I and Father one, you see the Father. Still, that would have been considered consistent with a picture in which Christ is not understood as co-equal with the Father. But then in chapter 20, and this is why it's necessary to know the Greek, the Apostle Thomas addresses him as Theos. O Kyrios mu ke O Theos, my Lord and my God. Now, why is that important? Well, it shows that already in the Gospel of John, a distinction has been made. Already it's understood there's a difference between talking about God as the transcendent one, who is the source of all things, and a God, who might manifest that source, but who is not the source. And so, I mean, already, if you know the language, the philosophical language at the time, if Christ is spoken of as the express image, the character of God, you're already deeply enmeshed in the language that was shared by monotheistic pagans, Hellenistic Jews, and Christians of the first generation that presumed all these metaphysical categories. So when you say, what's the biblical God? Well, the biblical God of the New Testament is, among other things, most definitely the fully developed, metaphysically defined understanding of the transcendent God that you then find in later tradition expressed by, say, Maximus the Confessor or Thomas Aquinas or Anselm.
Now, of course, when you're referring to some of these fathers, it's not, as you pointed out a minute ago, it's not just an Augustine or an Anselm or an Aquinas, those in the West, but it's also those in the East.
There is, East, West, ancient, patristic, medieval, up to the modern period. This is the common voice of all Christians. I mean, to reject that metaphysics is basically to reject the whole line, the whole continuum of Christian thought from the first generation to the present.